If not, I will pick someone and we go maybe first with RosaLyn. As RosaLyn, you said, you're based in Germany, but also you have activities on the African continent. So maybe, please, from your perspective, why should we start changing the relationships now, as they haven't been changed in the last, let's say, hundreds of years, and why is now the time to do it?
Okay, thank you very much for putting that across to me. My opinion, from my working experience in Africa, it is not just about changing the relationship right now. Luckily, we all have seen what the pandemic has brought to us. It has unstabilized all markets. It doesn't matter if it's the European market or the African market. And we all know also that if we don't do anything tangible, anything serious to move forward, that Africa will be lacking behind. And how do we do that? I think that right now is the best time to do it because we have, in the moment, the ongoing discussion about EPAs, because it has been extended to December 2020. So right now is the time to make sure that while changing things, also that guide our trading relationship with Europe and Africa.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Thank you for that response. I like that. You talk from the African perspective, even though being in Dortmund, and I find that quite interesting and also quite inspiring. And that would lead me maybe to another perspective. And Stépahn-Eloïse, you're based in Paris, as far as I know. You are European, you are French. And from your perspective, it would be a different perspective. And still, you're very, very active when it comes to Africa. And how is it from this European perspective that it is important to you and to your organization to change the relationship that has been there in the past? Like, what is your motivation from looking at this relationship from the European side?
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you very
good.
well. Yeah, that's as well.
Okay, yes, I can hear you. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to express my view on a very tricky question. As RosaLyn said, I think the COVID situation changed completely the perspective, although it is something very deep and rooted in a general change of civilization, I hope, over the next couple of years, coming also from digital technology and digital revolution. So I think, you know, the COVID situation shows that we are globally connected, and we are even more than ever dependent on emerging markets. And from a macro perspective, I would say, and even like just observation, is that a lot of African countries managed to deal with these sort of current global issues better than Europeans did. And I think it's important to have this in mind. So, you know, we all share we know that demographically, economically, we need to a better partnership with Africa coming from Europe. And this requires a lot of changes of perspective. I think why am I so personally passionate about that, and also why is Digital Africa an interesting tool for doing this? Sorry, I have a bit of chat. Yeah, it's so first I think that looking at a different kind of partnership with the African continent and the emerging economy than the youth of the continent help us and is necessary to see a common future and build a common future that is still fully aware of its history. And I think that it's an important point that we need to be able to build a better world together by also building a common and mutual awareness. And I think so coming from Digital Africa's mission and vision actually is, you know, inclusive development will come from made in Africa digital innovation, because the digital revolution across the continent and what the youth is doing across the continent is actually showing that another perspective on developing economy and dealing with the world's most pressing challenges. So I was a bit long, but that would be my answer.
Great. Thank you, Stépahn-Eloïse. That's great to hear. And I hear you talk a lot about interconnectedness and about the youth of the continents, right? And that we are so interconnected that we basically don't have another option than working better together, right? That is what I hear from you and also RosaLyn. You both mentioned the COVID-19 crisis, which made it even more visible and understandable for us that there is a certain interconnectedness that we cannot ignore if we want to be sustainably successful. And what I like about it is that it leads us to the next topic, the interconnectedness between the two continents. And that leads me also to you, Youssouf. Youssouf, you're working with basically diaspora organization of the youth in Europe, right? And from your perspective, now hearing what the two panelists said about the interconnectedness, have you seen it also before the COVID? And where do you see maybe also the potential in that interconnectedness when it comes to Africa and Europe?
Thank you. As you know, my personal business is involved with media, the European.
Youssouf, for me, it is very hard to hear you. Can the other panelists hear Youssouf?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Oh, thank you this time. Can you hear Moses? Hello, Moses.
We can hear you.
Eric, can you hear me?
Yes.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I can't hear. Can you hear RosaLyn? No.
Okay, Youssouf, maybe we just wait for a second. For the others, can we hear each other? RosaLyn, Erick, Stépahn-Eloïse.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it possible for you to hear Youssouf? Because for me at the moment it isn't.
Yeah, I can. It's not loud, but I can hear him. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Then Youssouf, just go ahead.
Oh, okay. So as I said, I myself was involved in the last 6-7 years. You know, in collaboration with the community. So about population very mitigated because we can see how the relationship has been evaluated for the last 6-8 years. You know, for 6 years, it was only the head of state meeting and discussing about the population. And now they're involved, you know, entrepreneurs, they're involved in the private sector, NGOs. I can see that it's evaluating that the global issues and the perspective we need to understand diaspora or as an entrepreneur is to make they will and what we want to develop in terms of boosting entrepreneurship. And there are 4 key issues we are trying to we will go from the partnership to the business with the support of the head of state. And one of the key activities and the key point is, and we are discussing about for the last 4 or 5 years, is how to develop a better cooperation, multi-stakeholders. Hello? So, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
I was saying the phase of is multi-population and partnership with diaspora networks in Europe in order to harness and channel the collective power of the diaspora.
You need to put the volume up. I can't hear, it's too soft.
Maybe I should try to connect through my just give me a second. Just a second. Sorry about that.
All right, Youssouf, thank you for this input and talking about that perspective. I think it wasn't possible for us to hear everything, but we got most out of it, and we'll just continue with that point in a second. And now that you mentioned basically that you mentioned the diaspora, the economic relations, and you still see potential for improving them. And I would like to basically come to our next speaker, Erick. Erick, you had been introduced in the beginning. You are working with entrepreneurs for, I think, some years, at least, many years. And especially in this context, it is 5 years that you have founded GreenTec Capital Partners. And something, now that you work between the two continents in the private sector, something that would be interesting for us is, how do you imagine and envision the ideal relationship? So if you could make a wish, if you say, okay, that's where I want us to be in 20, 30 years from now, how would it look?
Well, I think that the way I foresee it will be that we can be in an environment where the information can be the same for everybody, because when you look at Africa, when you look at Europe, you had like was mentioned, you have a huge diaspora that's developed itself, where you have more and more this mix of culture, and unfortunately this mix of culture and the information out there are very different. So when you take some people who don't know really much about Africa, they really focus on some of the challenges that the continent had in the past. And I think that now what I hope is that in the future we can have a better understanding, and people can have a better understanding of what are the potential of Africa, and that they can also see this potential, this materialize. Because in the next years, we're going to have this big demographic boom. What we hope is that Africa is going to be prepared to receive that young populations will, and as Africa is actually doing the transition toward technology, and I think that this is the kind of Africa that I hope to see. A young Africa was really creating added value product and services on the continent, and we can actually show that image and transfer that information to the other continent, including Europe, so that we can have better relations. Because I think that the notion of information, the notion of data will take more and more place in the future, and will allow to have a common view of what is really the potential and what is really the added value that the continent can bring to the global economy.
Thank you, Erick. Let me challenge you a little, because we're on a hot seat here. We're all on hot seats. So what I hear is you talk about products and services that Africans should produce, or that should be produced in Africa. And that sounds similar to very much what I heard from my elders when I was 20 years ago, when I was a young boy. However, in those last 20 years, we might not have seen the development that those elders were hoping for. So the question that goes to you is, what are you actively doing in order to make that a reality?
Well, what we're trying to do at the moment, first, we try to be very active in investing in startup in Africa, because that's kind of this connection between the youth and the technology, which represents, from my perspective, the future of Africa. That's one aspect. And the second aspect is we're trying to work on how can we create more trust between the information that are shared between Africa and Europe. Because you have, at the moment, we have a big momentum of organization in Europe who are willing to work with companies and organizations in Africa. But unfortunately, there's this challenge in terms of trust, being able to assess the quality of information. And we are trying to work to develop solutions that can help European people to also understand, what kind of information out there, who already use that information, what they can do to use that information to create value also in their activities, and create more synergy between both of them. So those are the two ways that at GreenTec we're trying to be involved in that transformation.
Nice, thank you, Eric. Thank you for shedding light on that, on what you are doing and the organization is doing. And what I hear behind that is, of course, we talk again about youth, private sector, we talk about entrepreneurship, but also what lies behind it is a change of the narrative, right? So that's what I see here, that the story changes, right? It is, we talk about youth as an opportunity, we talk about entrepreneurship as an opportunity, we talk about Africa and African countries as the next most interesting and promising markets. And RosaLyn, that leads me to you, because you're also based here in Germany. We all know that you're quite active and you get a lot of visibility also for Africa in Germany, and especially in the region where you are. And I would like to ask you, do you see a change of the narrative? Do people also here in Germany and in Europe perceive Africa in current times differently? And if yes, how can we push that development even more? Can you, Youssouf, Eric, can you hear RosaLyn?
I'm here now, sorry. I was muted. Yeah, there are changes given the time I've been on the go, 10 years exactly today. We have seen lots of changes, and from the African side and also the German side, the European side. And what would be very fine, what to see is an intercontinental, is it intercontinental between Africans that is trading amongst ourselves properly again. We have a lot of products out there in the market that makes a lot of basis too. But however, I think that because of these PPAs, again, the visibility of our products and services are somehow varied. In that regards, I would say that, when they are updating the PPAs for 2020, we should be careful to make sure that democracy and human rights, these points are covered carefully. We should also make sure that poverty eradication is also, thoughtfully penned in there. Migration and mobility is something what is quite important. You can't change how people move from point to point, but however, you can change how Europeans perceive us Africans coming from Africa to Europe. We bring added value, and we take also what we come back to our countries too. So we should be careful that these instruments protect our rights to live in the countries we're living, our rights to work in the countries we're working, and our rights also to interrelate. To create this bridge is what we are creating. Because in the current EPA agreements, it can be perceived that diaspora was not carefully thought before these documents were produced. But right now, with the exchange and added value, what diaspora remittances, I want to say, with the diaspora remittances, that adds a lot of values, especially in the case of Nigeria. You see that the diaspora remittances worldwide is already holding its place in the economic of Nigeria. And the same also with other countries like Kenya and so forth. So my take on your discussion is that we should make sure that when they create instruments, before they are signed by our government, we should look at it carefully, very, very carefully, so that they will help us also to accelerate in our trading relationship.
Thank you, RosaLyn. Thank you, RosaLyn. You're the first one who dares to speak about government on this panel and to speak about rights and frameworks, and I like that because, of course, we all come from an entrepreneurship perspective, but the frame is being set by governments largely. So what can we do? How can we trade? How can we develop? And I would like to pick this point up and pass it to the other panelists. So from your perspective, how can governments actually support the development of entrepreneurship on the continent, and maybe even the scaling up of entrepreneurs so that they can develop solutions that have even a higher impact? So how can frameworks amplify what entrepreneurs are doing anyways in Africa? And I would like to pass that question to you, Stépahn-Eloïse, and then to you, Erick, as you are both working directly with entrepreneurs in different markets in Africa, and as you probably also hear what they ask. So maybe you can tell us a bit more about that, Stépahn-Eloïse.
Yes, I'm sorry. So I missed the precedent speaking. So I hope I won't be completely out of the blue. But to answer your question more directly, so yes, of course, government and political responsibility is crucial in building a new partnership and building bridges across Africa and the rest of the world, and across and from Africa with the rest of the world, and Europe especially. I think so. On the one hand, we need to be able to support policies that advance innovative digital entrepreneurship across Africa. And this is a key area for Digital Africa's action currently. So what we're trying to do here, I think it's, both working not so much on like what should be done, but on building on creating the condition for the dialogue to be possible between local stakeholders who knows better what they need to be able to either be able to develop their project and develop impactful projects. So whether it's about fiscality, whether it's about data and like the access to data, and I know this is also something Erick might have brought up. Like how do we ensure that circulation of information and data is actually free, and that government has a legal framework for making data accessible. I think that the political consideration about how do we support digital innovation ecosystem, because innovation comes from ecosystems, is clearly another area of cooperation and renewing a partnership between Europe and Africa, because Europe had to face and we're facing the same issues, whether it's around data sovereignty, whether it's around the privacy and the issues around privacy when it comes to digital ecosystem. So I'm speaking, of course, a lot on this side of like digital technology, and our organization is named Digital Africa, but I think it's a very a key aspect of also giving more and unleashing more future opportunities for youth and for all the tech talent and the talent in general in Africa and in the diaspora as well.
Thank you, Stépahn-Eloïse. Do you think that data will be one deciding factor when it comes to economic power of players on both continents? And do you see anything that might influence this, who can work with what data in the future?
Sorry, I'm going to mute you, Sannssi, because there's a feedback loop, but I think I heard your question. So just to give you an example, I think, like, for example, the negotiation and the establishment of the African continental free trade area is a key and an opportunity both for African entrepreneurs and youth, and for renewing a partnership with Europe. Because first, it is establishing the largest single market in the world with 1.2 billion consumers, basically. It is intended to promote goods and eventually services which will be made in Africa. And so in the same logic, there could be some conversation and support, and I think a lot of action could be done around certification, intellectual property, industrial protection. And I know that we know that there's a specific protocol who is being discussed on e-commerce, which is a strategic area for digital entrepreneurship. So I'm just one example, and there's a lot of organizations such as Smart Africa, Innovation for Policy, who we are collaborating with. And I think that these are existing bridges, existing networks on which the European organization should probably leverage and be also collaborating further. Yes, but I don't know if that answers your question. But.
Yes, definitely. It's some interesting insights to hear from you and to hear about the perspective and the take that Digital Africa takes on these matters. And I promise that we pass those questions to the two of you, so Stépahn-Eloïse and Erick. Erick, the same question. You invested, I think, in more than 20 entrepreneurs, maybe even close to 40 by now on the African continent. So you are very close to many entrepreneurs. So the ones you work with, obviously you try to bring them to success. It's also in your own interest. So what do you think, from a government perspective, would need to happen, be it in African market or be it in European markets, in order to even amplify the impact that these entrepreneurs have?
Well, the first thing I can say is that it's necessary that we review a little bit the relation between the entrepreneur and the government, because when you talk with entrepreneurs in Africa, most of them, they don't want to have a business that connect with the government. And sometimes they're right, but sometimes it's also it's not so. I don't think it's right to do so, because I think that there is a necessity to have a clear synergy, because at the government level they are responsible for like the education in the country, the setup of the infrastructure, the policy, all those elements that actually startup needs to leverage on in order to build a business. When we look in terms of the industrialization that Africa needs in order to create more value on the continent, definitely that will require to have a pipeline of qualified people. When we look at the startup today using technology, sometimes it's for them challenging to find employees with the appropriate skills in terms of technology. So I think that there is a role of the government to try to review what kind of educations and what kind of style of education has to be implemented, so that the new economy can benefit from this pipeline of young people that will be qualified. I think that also, the startup, the digitalization will create a lot of solutions to improve, for example, the solution for educations. And but even if you have a solution that is digital, you need to have an infrastructure to allow people to access this solution. And that is something that only government can do that. And I think that from a policy point of view, there were already several initiatives that have been put in place even before the COVID, with the Startup Act in Kenya, in Tunisia, in Ghana. I think that also Senegal also went into it, so there is now a momentum to go in that direction. There is now a bigger interest from government looking at new entrepreneur startup as being the future of employment also in Africa. And I think that because of this, government are not trying. And when we look at the situation with the COVID, it definitely gives a boost to the interest of the government to move to digital, although some of the government in Africa were kind of very slow on that topic. So I think that we're going in that directions. The different shock that we receive from the economic, social, and health that we receive drive us more and more in that direction. And I believe that the government in Africa are now taking really seriously those aspects in considerations to support the ecosystem of the entrepreneurs. So I think that is quite a good thing. The last point is that obviously the solutions that are applied in Europe and the solutions that can be applied in Africa are very different. But as I said, there is definitely an impact for everything that's happening in Africa connected to Europe. So I encourage the synergy between the government in Europe and Africa in order to find a better synergy, because there is a transfer of technology and knowledge that's quite interesting for Africa to leverage on the some of the raw material, the strengths that we have in the countries to help develop the continent.
Thank you, Eric. I see there's a consensus on the fact that governments have to play their role, that we cannot and should maybe also not avoid them when we setting up our new structures for the future. Also for entrepreneurs, there's something to consider. And I see that all of you basically have certain demands towards the government, and having worked myself in a lobby organization for quite some years, I know that those organizations are actually the ones who can group interests and then push them forward. And Youssouf, what I see from your organization is that you regrouped quite a significant amount of young diasporans in Europe. And what I see when I looked at your organization, it looks like where you're heading to is also to create a voice for these young people, these young diasporans in Europe. And very often what we saw in the past is that many of us, they come here for their studies, and at some point they might go back also to their home countries and develop companies, go into politics, etc., etc. So from your perspective, having set up this group, creating this voice of young diasporans in Europe, do you think that it is, do you also look at the African continent, and do you also want to go more in the direction of lobbying? Do you think that is necessary? And if it's necessary, how can we make sure that the entrepreneurs, the young people can actually have this, maybe even Pan-African, the strong Pan-African voice, and bring their demands to governments also in the form of that they are really being heard in the end?
Hello, I'm not sure if you can hear me better now. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, we can hear you better now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. Oh, finally. So yeah, I had a lot to say, but yeah, I will try to answer to your question directly. Our organization work a lot in Africa as well. I think Eric can confirm this because we had a chance to meet a couple of times in Africa. And what we do in terms of involving diaspora entrepreneurs back home, it's through helping them to set up their own businesses there. How do we do that? We partner with the key actors on the continent. For example, AfriLabs is one of our key partners. We have a strategical partnership with them. What do? We make sure that the hubs in Africa them better. What does mean that being a diaspora entrepreneur, and what are the expectations of them to be able to help them to set up their business down, because it costs a lot for a young guy from anywhere in Europe to set up a business in Africa. But what do we want to do is to make sure through our partnership, we will help the hubs to understand us and make sure that they will help them before even flying down in Africa to do the first demand they want to have, to make sure they have access to the network since as they are new in the continent, and make sure that they will meet also the right institution to develop their businesses. And what do we do this? Our plan is not only to say, okay, you are diaspora, you need to go back to do business home. We make sure that also that you will get a partner down, because a partnership is the key. Most of the diaspora entrepreneurs, they don't have the right business plan, because I don't like to say it, but we have more than 80% of failure diaspora entrepreneurs down. Why? It's because they have to choose. Once you want to, for example, Cameroon, so you will. Okay. Trying 1 month, 2 months, they will fly back to Europe to say, hey, I tried, I didn't achieve. But we want to make sure that they will put those corruption, those bureaucracy in their business plan to say, I'm down now in Africa, I have to do it. There is no possibility to go back home. And how? You need a local partner. It's not something we'll advise you to go and have the share 100% for yourself. You need to give like 40 to 50% to a local partner to make sure that they will feel the ownership of the business. And most of those cases works well in the continent. And what do we do also from from Africa to Europe is to promote access to market to those entrepreneurs, because nowadays many countries like Senegal are very much involved in production of products and services. And what we do, we make sure that the product they want to develop or sell in Europe, they will get partners from diaspora side, because diaspora understand better what they are selling and can help them, in terms of branding, to have the right product for the right market. And the example we've been following is the Asian market. Why is it possible for anyone to cook Asian food in Europe? It's because the process is well controlled. They do have product. They do have the industrial production and access to the European market. As far as we, as diaspora, we cannot help our community to understand the process and be involved with them on the process, we cannot develop this access to market. What do we promote also is how we can share the technology and knowledge we have with the continent. The knowledge and technology sharing is one of the key to make sure that the production will be competitive in the continent. Why? Maybe I'm here, I do have access to some technology. I need to bring this technology to my country, to my people. I don't need always to be in Africa, but I need to be involved through, mentorship program, through making sure that they will get the right technology and get the right information. And what else we can do is access to finance. Why not making sure that we as diaspora, because we do have some money, €1,000 is something, to help or to be partner in any business in Africa, or 2,000-3,000. And something we are missing as a diaspora is, so far, our dream was to make sure that we'll have something like AfriLabs in Europe, to make sure that the Austrian network, Germany, France, and others will come together as business people, as a network to do this work together. If we talk about ecosystem, we need to build our own ecosystem in Europe to be partner and collaborate. This is the key to really boost the diaspora entrepreneurship here in Europe and world Africa. Those key sectors are very, very demanding, because so far there is no value chain for diaspora entrepreneurship. If we cannot help ourselves here to become a better entrepreneurs, how can we help the others in Africa? Those are the things we are facing as a diaspora network involved in our ecosystem building here in Africa. I think you've got me a bit now, Moses. Time. Hello.
So thank you.
Yeah, we heard you.
Oh,
we heard
perfect.
You. It was very interesting what you said, and it is quite interesting that you already come actually to the last question that we have for this panel for you. You gave already part of the answer, because the last question we wanted to discuss, as we're also already coming to an end, is how can entrepreneurs actually be or fulfill that role of creating this new partnership that we all want, because we see the old partnership doesn't work. And part of what you were saying is basically the role of the diaspora and diaspora entrepreneurs, how they can create more than just a bridge, I would say, but add value to both markets, to people of both continents. And this question I would like to pass on to all panelists, starting with RosaLyn, then going Erick and Stépahn-Eloïse. How do you think young entrepreneurs can improve the relationships between the two continents, and then also create a new dimension to it and a new narrative? So, RosaLyn, we go with you first.
Hear me now?
Yes,
yeah.
now we can hear.
Good, thank you. So I will start with a country like Nigeria, for example. in order for entrepreneurs to log in, they have to have the backing of the government. For example, there are different ways to get to different roads to get to Rome. Let me put it that way. But internally, the issues have to be solved before you go. I'm having a problem with the line. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So constant change of governance, no possibility of sustainability, unclear bureaucracy in the part of Nigeria, for example, makes it quite difficult for entrepreneurs to easily log in. So in order to bridge that, I would think that diaspora have to create some sort of network that will support and enhance participation of entrepreneurs both ways.
Thank you, RosaLyn. Erick, from your perspective, how can entrepreneurs change the current relationship between the two continents?
I think that narrative comes from experience and results. And I think that at the moment, the narrative existing is built on elements that happened before. And entrepreneurs, which are very active in the economy and the ecosystem, and also present globally, should be the one demonstrating more success stories. We need to have the best business case that we can promote, present, and share with more and more people, because then the narrative will be influenced. And that's, I think, that is one of the key role of the entrepreneur, is to be able to also being visible and show the different success story that they have. We know that in Africa, or relate to Africa, that you had some very great entrepreneurs that made developed solutions, developed market, have been very successful. And we need to have some hero among those entrepreneurs so that we can build also stories around them, and that will definitely change the narrative. And that will impact also organization, government to do more, so that we have more of those cases, and also have more young entrepreneurs following those steps, and not being limited by the perceived risk that people see when they think about business in Africa.
All right, thanks, Erick. Thanks, Erick. And I think this question of risk, it comes up now for the first time in this panel, but it's an important one. And we see that with organizations, that they very often perceive, like they think of Africa and they think of risk first, and before they think about the opportunity. So for everyone who's in this conversation today, who's listening to it, definitely there's more than risk when you look at different African markets. And yes, probably entrepreneurs can be the one with a success story to change the narrative. Stépahn-Eloïse, you have the last question of the panel, or it is the same question, but we are the last one who can speak to that question. So can entrepreneurs be the ones who change the relationship? And if yes, from your perspective, how can they do that?
Thank you. I mean, I think we could also ask the question: can entrepreneur save the world? But so this is I just want to remind, being an entrepreneur is dealing with challenges all the time, wherever in the world. Obviously, support systems are more concentrated in some areas of the world than others. So I think, yes, like Erick said, we need to build a new narrative. We need to develop that narrative, show success stories, show that the passion for entrepreneurship across the continent in Africa, across Europe, is actually bringing solutions, and is something that is building a real economy and a real sustainable world. I think that said, entrepreneurs would, for me, it's also a lot about education, and it goes a little beyond just pure entrepreneurship and whether it should be based in Europe or in Africa. It's also about building some framework and knowledge and skills around that will be shared and distributed across Europe and Africa to build a more sustainable and real economy, to be able to face pandemic and work on this together. And you know, as a European, I had the chance to be part of the Erasmus program, which I think everybody knows here. And I think that, you know, if we really wanted to be, and following also what Maria Flashbach said in the opening of this Afrolynk conference, I think that if we were really dreaming about something that entrepreneurs can do in this renewed partnership, I would love to see something such as an Erasmus bringing African entrepreneurs to Europe and European entrepreneurs in Africa, and really, like, by being able to identify some key knowledge, key skills, key challenges, whether on like cybersecurity, whether on fintech, whether on agriculture or inclusion in general. I think that it would be really fantastic and a major step for both our continent.
Nice, thank you, Stépahn-Eloïse. As a quick explanation, because I think that especially people who didn't study in Europe, they might not know what Erasmus is, and I will just explain that briefly. Erasmus is a program that is like available in Europe, where students will actually get scholarships in order to study at least one semester in another European country, to get to know more of Europe than just the country they are born in and that they study in, and to make it easy for them, facilitate that exchange between the different countries. And that was then exactly what Stépahn-Eloïse was relating to. Having such a program between Africa and between Europe could also change the relationship, as we then build new narratives and people can actually see what happens like to my neighbor, what happens in my neighboring continent. And that is quite interesting. Coming to a closing of this panel, we discussed different topics. It all revolved around the relationship, right? And what I find quite interesting is that, of course, we look at entrepreneurs, but we also look beyond that, right? We look at how can the narrative be changed? How can it be changed also by these entrepreneurs? And what are they already doing? I see Youssouf, you're speaking. Youssouf,
Yeah,
you're on mute, yeah. Yeah, please.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. If you have something to say, we can go a minute over time. But yeah.
That's I think that's ADYFE, you know, like, you know what, as of music, we need, this is very important, and we need we need to make sure that people are focusing on investment, you know how, and all need this way, you know, engage, you know, in terms of negotiation with the decision they made, social, really, you know, we cannot you.
Youssouf, thank you for this comment, for closing this panel. Unfortunately, I could not hear all of it. I hope that the viewers could hear all of it, but we got some keywords, and you can do thumbs up or thumbs down if we got the right keywords. We talked about collaboration, investment, and how we can foster that. And I see that some of the members in the audience, they could hear you, so that is good. And with that, I will try to find the closing word and try to incorporate what you were just saying. So we were looking at entrepreneurs, we're talking about the relationship that the two continents have and had, and why it is important to change that now. And we figured out that one important key aspect is the interconnectedness that becomes more and more apparent to all of us, that our continents, we are neighbors on our continents, and then second, through digital, through globalization, we are quite connected. So no matter on which of the two you are, there is the high chance that developments on one end will influence what your organizations can do, what opportunities they can take or they cannot take. And all of us seem to be quite motivated and inspired to change the narrative that has been dominant in the last, let's say, decades, to change it to a more opportunity-driven perspective. And with that, I would like to thank all the panelists, Stépahn-Eloïse, RosaLyn, Youssouf, Erick. It was a pleasure to have you here with us. And with that, I will pass on, I think, to Kumbirai, who will go on in the program. And please, for those of you in the audience, if you liked what you heard on this panel, look up the organizations that the representatives work with. I know all 4 of them, and I can tell you that they're doing great things, and see maybe how you can involve yourself, because always it starts with ourselves, and we can make change and we can bring action forward. Thank you so much, and I pass it on to Kumbirai. Thanks for all the panelists for being with us, and I hope you stay with us for the afternoon. Thank you.